What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. He is Anthony SanFilippo. This is Phillies Stoplight.
Brought to you by our good friends at Wapner Newman, Philadelphia's personal injury attorneys.
Yeah, and as much as I pride myself on Pattison as a site that doesn't take off the weekends, this is a little much today, but it's a story that I felt like we needed to come on here and talk about, and that's the evolving situation with Bryce Harper, with Dave Dombrowski, with the Phillies in general, kind of regarding comments that Dave Dombrowski made in his year-end press conference last week. Yesterday, there was a report that the comments about Dombrowski not being sure that Bryce Harper would ever be elite again, didn't say he wouldn't be elite, but just being unsure that he would be not elite, and kind of comparing him to Freddie Freeman. Uh, Upset about those. There was a report yesterday that from John Heyman in the New York Post that Bryce Harper was, quote, pissed off about that. And if you had any questions about the legitimacy of that report, Bryce Harper spoke on the record today with Matt Gelb of The Athletic. And I'm not going to rephrase and read the entire story that Matt Gelb did, because it's a subscription service and it's one that I subscribe to and you should subscribe to, because it's really good content, as you see. Like I figured all along we wouldn't see or hear from Bryce Harper until spring training. Evidently, this was important enough to him, Anthony, that he felt like he needed to come out and talk.
Yeah, he did, and maybe I'm misreading this whole thing, Tim. Maybe I'm way off on it. But the way I look at it is there are two people who are absolutely 100% allowed to offer any kind of comment, criticism, praise, whatever they want about the Philadelphia Phillies. It's John Middleton and Dave Dombrowski. And if Dave Dombrowski wants to come out and say, yeah, it was a down season for Bryce Harper, he could say that. If he wants to say, we'll see if he's going to be elite again when he comes back, kind of a little bit of a challenge to Bryce Harper, he could say that. If Bryce Harper takes that the wrong way, if Bryce Harper takes that as the Phillies are trying to trade me, right, just because John Heyman puts it out, or I'm sorry, Joel Sherman, not John Heyman, New York Post, doesn't matter. Joel Sherman puts it out. Take that for what it is. You don't listen to WIP. Don't listen to the outside noise. Dave Dombrowski didn't come out and say they were disappointed in Bryce Harper and want to get rid of him, right? That was not what was said. So take it in context. And the fact that it's been blown up the way that it has, I think it's being a mountain made out of a molehill, in all honesty. I think Bryce Harper needs to be a little bit more thick-skinned and take it as, hey, this is a motivator going into next season. And I think Dave Dombrowski and John Middleton had every right, or, I say Middleton, he didn't say it, but I mean, he's one of those guys that could. They would have every right to say what Dave Dombrowski said at that press conference. Were we a little surprised by it? Sure we were. But he has a right to say it. There's nothing wrong with what he said, and it's fair. It's totally fair. So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm a little bit perplexed that it is gaining the legs that it's getting, because it really shouldn't have them.
A couple days ago, I kind of wondered, are we making too big of a deal out of this? Obviously not. I mean, if Bryce Harper is making this big of a deal out of it, obviously he did feel hurt by those comments, and that was the phrase he used. It was a little unclear, not because of how Matt wrote it, just based on his comments. Is he hurt that it's led to trade speculation, or was he hurt by the comments? I think it's kind of somewhere in between. Like, he's upset that Dombrowski made these comments that opened the door for the trade speculation, because it is true. And I would imagine at this point he regrets not having the opt-out in his deal. But one of the main reason he didn't have the opt-out in his deal is he spent almost his entire time in D.C. Hearing speculation about Bryce Harper's going to go to the Yankees, Bryce Harper's going to go to the Cubs, Bryce Harper's going to the Dodgers. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to be settled in one place. And I think it was misguided to think halfway through that deal the Phillies just out of doing a nice favor for him, we're going to reevaluate and redo his deal. Obviously, at this point, I don't think they're going to, and I don't think they should. But I think these comments by Dave Dombrowski, if someone had said them on MLB Network, or if you or I had come out and said them, completely fair. They're not incorrect what Dave Dombrowski said. It's just, I wonder, was there an angle, or was it just he was a little too honest? Because I hear people talk about, well, maybe he's trying to motivate Bryce Harper. If there's one thing Bryce Harper in my mind has never lacked, it's motivation, work ethic, anything like that. So it's one thing if you're going after like a 25-year-old guy that has potential, but maybe hasn't worked as hard, and you're saying, we need more from you. Bryce Harper's problem is that he's 33 years old, entered the league when he's 19, and his body the last few years has been inconsistent on allowing him to stay healthy. Some of that's been freak stuff, but like the wrist thing, these are going to happen. He may be at the point of his career where he only plays 130 games a season, and that is what it is. So I don't know, like, if the point was to be motivating him in some way, I just kind of feel like that's missing the mark.
Yeah, so and it's fair to say that, but I could tell you the same thing, that maybe there's something behind the scenes that we don't know about. Maybe they feel like Bryce wasn't as all in 2025 as he was in 2022, 23, 24. And I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying that was the case. I'm saying that maybe there's something there that we don't know. You know, I mean, he's got a big family now. They just had a fourth child, and we also all thought it was a weird off season with him going on TikTok and doing all of his, like, here's the latest health food craze that I'm doing and following and everything else. Like, he definitely seemed a little bit different this year. I just kind of always felt that Bryce was a little different than what he usually was. And that could be just getting older and more tired of it, and, not just kind of going through the motions sometimes. I mean, certainly could be. I could be way off on that, right? Impression. That's just being around him and being down there, just kind of felt like it was a little bit different with him all season long. And so maybe the Phillies kind of felt the same way. Maybe they know more than we do, that whether we're talking about it right now. And I don't think Dave Dombrowski ever says anything publicly that he didn't intend to say. I think he's one of those guys who's well trained at this, who knows what to say and when to say it, and knows what he's saying at all times. I think it was intentional, and I think it was intentional to light a spark. I don't necessarily know if that meant that they were going to look. If you were the Phillies and you wanted to trade Bryce Harper, why would you come out and criticize Bryce Harper? So, like, I believe Dombrowski when he says, we have no interest in trading this guy. We love Bryce. We want to be part of the team. Like, I believe that, because you wouldn't devalue the player by questioning what he's got left with 6 years at 25 million AAV over the course of those 6 years. You wouldn't devalue that if you were looking to trade it. I think it was purely motivational, and I don't think they have any intention of trading Bryce Harper, no matter what the speculation is. And if I'm wrong, Tim, I'll wear the egg on my face. I'll wear it. I don't think that's the intention at all this offseason.
I don't think it's the intention either. And, at first, the other day when Dave Dombrowski was on Foul Territory, I was like, oh, he got asked about this, but it was halfway through the interview. Probably just a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. I'm sure, like, word got back to him that was not well received, and that's probably had to do with him being on there. Like, in prep for the World Series, I thought it was a little bit of an awkward place for Dave Dombrowski to be on that show, because it's a national baseball show. But that's probably why he was on it. And I will say, like, I love listening to Dave Dombrowski talk about baseball. It's almost sad that he is such a good baseball executive, because I think if he had been a guy that at one point said, I'm going to go into media, I think he would have been great at it, because he loves the game. He has so many different teams that he's been around and been in charge of, that he has great stories. And I think he is extremely well-spoken, and probably not someone you need to do a ton of prep for coming into one of those events. That doesn't mean, though, that sometimes he doesn't say things that he shouldn't say. He should not have said July-ish earlier this year. And I know he did not guarantee that Andrew Painter was going to come up, and he made that clear, and I get that. but it did put a lot of pressure, not only on Andrew Painter, but on Rob Thompson, who had to answer about that for much of the year, and just the whole situation. It was kind of a self-inflicted error that coming off of Tommy John surgery, you should have just said, we have high hopes for him. We hope he'll impact the team this year, but we'll see. And I do wonder if this is like another one of those comments where you're just maybe a little bit too honest. And it's great for our purposes. And I do appreciate when guys don't just BS us and give us answers that shut everything down. But they certainly have to consider, in this case, the face of the franchise's reaction to those comments.
I mean, look, you could sit there and criticize the guy for that. Like, I mean, all right, he shouldn't have said July-ish. Well, maybe at the time the impression was that he was where he needed to be. I mean, you saw how he pitched well in Arizona Fall League. They were liking what they were seeing in March. They had a plan that they were putting together, that this is how it was going to go, and they expected more out of the player, out of the pitcher. I think giving us a time frame on Andrew Painter was fair, because otherwise, let's say he doesn't give the time frame, Tim. Let's say he says, well, we're going to let him progress as he progresses, and just, we'll see when he's ready to go. If that was the case, and that's how he did it, we would have been asking about Andrew Painter every 5 days. Like, literally, it would have been.
But we were anyway. That's the point. I don't remember another year where we talked about minor league players half as much as we did this past year. And a big reason for it was because they could have just said the summer generally. They've repeatedly said July-ish. And I don't want to get too hung up on this because it's the Harper thing, but it is to me kind of an example. I think it's relevant here.
Well, yeah, and I think it's relevant. I don't want to get hung up on it either, because my second point was going to be that, when you say what you say about Bryce, and listen, everybody's forgetting that Rob Thompson spoke about this as well. And Rob Thompson, and again, I believe this is coordinated. I don't think this was. I think Dombrowski and Thompson's answers were coordinated. He says that he feels that this will motivate him to have the best season of his career, right? So this is definitely a team, in my mind, the team saying, hey, Bryce, good year, but not good enough. We need more out of you. And we're not going to criticize you. We're not going to kill you, but this is how we're going to go about it. We're going to get your attention, and sometimes I think Bryce Harper feels that he does things his way and that's it, and nobody can tell him otherwise. And this is kind of just a little nudge. It's a little nudge. And if Bryce Harper can't take that, then maybe Bryce Harper's got the issues with Bryce Harper. And I get that he's older. Yes, your body breaks down. I remember, I was there. It broke down far sooner for me than it ever will for Bryce Harper, right? Like, it's going to happen, but it gets to a point when you get to a certain age where it does happen. And if those things are the case, so be it. But let's really look at Bryce since he came back. Like, his numbers were good, not great, right? Like, even if you take it in the smaller sample sizes and say, all right, fine, you didn't have a full season, you couldn't hit 35 home runs, drive in 100 runs, you couldn't be your typical self. He only hit 261. And you look at the second half of the season, it was meh. It was okay. He had a stretch there, in San Francisco, where he reminded us a couple of times, repeated himself, oh yeah, I'm one of the best players in baseball. Okay, fine, great. But that was only during a short stretch of games. As the rest of the season progressed, he wasn't playing like one of the best players in baseball. He was playing like a good player in baseball, but not one of the best players in baseball. That's all that Dave Dombrowski's pointing out. Like, you know what? We expect you to be one of the best players in baseball, and you're not right now. Okay, show us that you can be that again. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. I'm sorry, and we could criticize managers and general managers and players, and we all take different sides and have different opinions on this. But ultimately, I look at it and say, good on the Phillies for challenging their best player to be better. Good on the Phillies.
Well, it certainly ended any of this talk that I see all the time about Bryce Harper's actually running the team and stuff like that. Not to say, yeah, sure, Bryce Harper, I'm sure, has more influence with the Trey Turner signing and things of that nature than Alec Boehm or just like the average Phillies player. I'm not saying that, but the idea that like Dave Dombrowski calls Bryce Harper before making every move and gets his sign off, it's not happening. And clearly that line has been drawn here. I do also wonder, we've written about the possibility of an extension for Bryce Harper for years now. And one of the reasons I keep asking about it is because there's been enough said to know that this is not just something that was said one off. They want it. The Phillies have kind of politely said, like, you're under contract, and he is under contract for 6 more years. And Dave Dombrowski basically said that in the foul territory interview the other day. He's under contract for 6 more years. I've seen some people say like maybe this quote that he gave in the press conference was kind of pushing back on that idea of Bryce needing or being deserving of an extension. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me though either, because I think Bryce Harper's inability to stay healthy the last few years has mostly squashed that idea. Now, if he goes out and wins MVP next year and plays 155 games, maybe it gets back to that. But I didn't see a ton of people clamoring for they got to extend Bryce, they got to meet his demands. I think most people went into the offseason thinking it'll be a low-key offseason for Bryce Harper and see you in February.
Yeah, no, 100%, and that's really the case. Like, you didn't hear Bryce talk about wanting that extension this year. You heard it last year, right? But this year you didn't hear it, and I think
at the beginning of spring training, I did ask him, and he basically deferred to Scott Boras, every time he talks about it, expresses regret that Bryce Harper didn't listen to him. But that was one of the things Harper said in this interview with Matt Gelb, is that he went out of his way against Boras's wishes to not include the opt-out to show how committed he was to Philly. And that's why hearing trade speculation was hurtful to him, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me ask you this. Let's imagine he had the opt-out. Let's imagine he had the opt-out right now and could leave Philadelphia if he wanted to. Would he get the same contract that he's got remaining on his deal?
Yeah, probably, because the deal has become obsolete in many senses, like 26 million, whatever the average is. I don't know. I mean, I think the opt-out would have been after like the 4th or 5th year. He would have opted out.
100%. But I'm just playing devil. I'm just playing a game here. So yes, I agree with you that yes, he would make this. Would he make more than this? Would he get an extension? Would someone, if he were a free agent right now, would someone sign Bryce Harper to an 8, 9, 10-year deal at 30 to 35 million a year?
No, but I think they'd sign him to a 5 or 6 year deal with a higher average.
Right, but my point is that the whole notion of an extension goes out the window, because I don't think there's another team in baseball who would sign him beyond the 6 years that he's currently signed. So for the Phillies to politely decline extending him, it's the right thing to do. Again, I don't think that he has to prove that as he gets a little bit older and gets closer to the end of this contract, that he's not breaking down, that he physically can hold up, that you say, okay, I could put another couple years or 3-4 years on this deal and he'll still be a worthwhile player. So I think that it's smart to not do it now. The Phillies are right not doing it now. The one thing, and we'll wrap it on this, Tim, the one thing that I do think is important, and I won't give the Phillies credit for at this point, is Dombrowski said on that Foul Territory podcast that he had not talked to Harper yet. That, I think, is the mistake. And that's where I think he should have, after last Thursday, sometime between last Thursday and when did that Foul Territory thing air? Wednesday? Was it this Wednesday?
Thursday. Yeah, it was a week.
It was a week later. Okay, so sometime in that 7 days, especially because the trade rumors had already been out there, the stories were all written about what he said, whatever. Sometime in that 7 days, there should have been a communication from the Phillies and Bryce Harper, and there wasn't. And so if you're looking for something to sit there and say Phillies didn't handle it right, that's where it is, because you probably prevent Bryce Harper from talking to The Athletic today. You probably prevent the story from Joel Sherman coming out. All of that could have been nipped in the bud if the Phillies would have handled it differently between last Thursday and whatever, 2 Thursdays ago and this past Thursday. That's the thing where if I'm going to criticize the Phillies, that's where the criticism will come in.
Well, and I think you're right. The weird thing is it kind of like it got some reaction initially, then it was like a delayed, like a few days went by, and then I feel like it got a second life. And as much as going on Foul Territory, which is a good show, by the way, no offense to them, but as much as that was like intended to kind of squash the whole thing, I do wonder if it's a case where by going on there and talking about it, you lended it some credence and gave it more days in the news cycle and maybe made this into a bigger thing. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think Dombrowski's assessment from a baseball sense about Bryce Harper was 100% correct and is important to consider when roster building for the future. But clearly it didn't sit well with Harper, and now we're going to see can this kind of be put back together. I don't think it's like irredeemable or anything, but it's also not nothing. I think they need to make some amends here, reach an understanding, and kind of go from there. That's going to do it for this episode. We will have all the latest covered on Pattison. Thank you to our sponsor, Wapner Newman, and we will see you guys next time.